Welcome to The Explainer. I'm really pumped about this one because we're looking at something that literally shapes the entire global economy, but it's kind of hiding in plain sight. We're going to build a totally intuitive understanding of global trade policy from the absolute ground up. Today, we decode the hidden math of global trade. If you've ever wondered how the prices of the stuff you buy are actually driven by these invisible global rules, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's map out our journey. We're going from basic definitions right into the hidden traps of global trade. We'll hit the basics of tariffs, look at the protection illusion, define effective rate of protection, break down the math of value added, explore the tariff escalation trap, and finally look at some real-world trade realities. So, Section 1, the basics of tariffs, setting the foundation. To understand the complex math, we absolutely have to start at the beginning. At its core, a tariff is simply a tax imposed by a government on imported goods as they cross national boundaries. That's pretty much it. By adding this tax, a government is basically saying, we're going to make these imported goods a bit more expensive compared to our own domestic products. It theoretically gives local producers a bit of a leg up in the marketplace. Now, governments generally use two main types of tariffs. First up, protective tariffs. These are your high rates, specifically designed to restrict foreign competition, to shield domestic industries. Then you've got revenue tariffs. These are kept purposefully low. The goal here isn't to stop imports. It's just to generate a steady stream of income for the government. But here's the catch with those protective tariffs. While they do shield domestic industries in the short term, having zero competition from foreign producers often means domestic companies can get kind of lazy or inefficient over time, and they really struggle to compete in the long run. Which brings us to Section 2, the protection illusion, looking beneath the surface. Because what governments intend to do with tariffs isn't always what actually happens. So I want to ask you a question. Does a high tariff always mean high protection? Like if a government slaps a massive tax on imported smartphones, are the local smartphone manufacturers just guaranteed to thrive? You'd probably instinctively say yes, right? But in the world of global trade, assumptions like that can be incredibly dangerous. The reality completely shatters that illusion. When you read in the news that a country placed, say, a 20% tariff on a product, you're only looking at the nominal tariff rate. That's just the tax on the finished product. It totally ignores a massive reality of modern manufacturing. Think about it. To build a finished product, domestic industries have to import raw materials and components, right? If those imported components are also getting taxed, that nominal rate is basically a mirage. To see what's actually happening, we need the effective rate of protection, which accounts for taxes on both the inputs and the outputs. Section 3. Effective rate of protection, the true measure. This is the authentic, professional tool economists use. So the absolutely crucial point here is this. The effective rate of protection, or ERP, measures the percentage increase in domestic value added that's made possible by the tariff structure compared to what it would be under free trade. Remember, value added is just the difference between the cost of your inputs and the final price of the product. ERP digs deep. It shows us the actual true level of protection an industry's value added is getting. Now, what's really interesting is we can actually prove this historically. Just look at Bella Balassa's famous 1962 table of nominal and effective tariff rates. The nominal rates look, somewhat standard, but the effective rates, they tell a wild story. The ERP on textiles and clothing was frequently more than double the nominal rate. But check out ships in the UK or the common market. The effective rate is literally negative. No way, right? The protective effect of the low duties on the ships themselves was totally wiped out by the high duties they had to pay just to import the materials to build the things. Moving on to Section 4, the math of value added. how inputs change the game. Let's make this math super intuitive. Let's walk through this step by step using cars as an example. Step 1. A country imposes a 25% tariff on imported cars. Looks amazing on paper for local car makers, right? But then comes step 2. The country also charges a 15% tariff on imported car parts. Well, since local manufacturers need those parts to actually build their cars, step 3 kicks in. Their production costs skyrocket. This shrinks their domestic value added. Those high input tariffs literally eat right into the profits that the finished good tariff was supposed to protect in the first place.
And this brings us to a mind-blowing concept: negative protection, or negative ERP. It's this stunning irony in trade policy where a government can actually harm its own domestic industry. Think about it. If the tax burden placed on your imported raw materials is heavier than the protective barrier you put on the final product, the domestic industry is worse off than if there were zero tariffs at all. They're essentially getting punished for manufacturing at home. Crazy, right?
Let's zoom out to Section 5, the tariff escalation trap, a global consequence.
Let's see how this builds using a classic supply chain: coffee. In step 1, a developing nation exports raw green coffee beans. Importing countries usually apply a super low, maybe even zero tariff on those raw beans. But let's say that developing country decides to process the beans, roasting and packaging them in step 2, and then tries to export that roasted coffee in step 3. Suddenly, boom, they are hit with a massive tariff from the importing country. The tariff literally escalates as the product moves up the processing chain. The real-world impacts of this tariff escalation are profound. It effectively limits the scope for processing agriculture and labor-intensive products in exporting countries. It stifles their industrial growth. It blocks export diversification, essentially forcing them to just rely endlessly on exporting primary raw products. They get trapped at the bottom of the value chain, completely blocked from accumulating the capital and skills they need to build their own processing industries.
And the consequences here go way beyond just economics. The Food and Agriculture Organization highlights a really devastating reality. They note that tariff escalation is perceived as a source of environmental damage to exporting countries, a tax on sustainability. Because these nations are forced into relying so heavily on raw primary product exports, it leads directly to the overdepletion of natural resources. They end up degrading their resource base and disrupting their ecological balance just to maintain a basic income.
Finally, Section 6, real-world trade realities. Let's anchor all of this in some hard data. Take a look at this data on Indian manufacturing from the 1980s and 90s. Studies analyzing the effective rate of protection there found massive, measurable distortions. For intermediate goods, we're talking things like synthetic rubber, paint, steel, the ERP swung wildly, anywhere between 50 and 150%. Meanwhile, capital goods had vastly lower protection. This proves for sure that just measuring nominal tariffs is totally inadequate when you're trying to figure out the complex incentives governments are actually creating for domestic production.
And this isn't just history, it remains a pressing modern headline. The UN is still reporting that tariff escalation is directly holding back African industrialization today. It's exactly why reducing tariff escalation is such a critical sticking point in World Trade Organization negotiations. Developing nations are actively fighting to eliminate this hidden math, just so they can place their processed agricultural goods on an even playing field with other products in the international trading system. Which brings us to our final thought. Next time you see a headline about some new tariff being imposed, I want you to ask yourself, wait, what is happening to the inputs? As we've seen, high tariffs absolutely do not automatically equal high protection. Sometimes, a country's attempt to shield an industry can actually end up destroying its value added instead. So, if the true rate of protection is hidden deep in the supply chain, Who is really winning the global trade war? Thank you so much for joining me to decode this. I really hope this explainer has completely changed how you look at international commerce. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.